So I think we're live. Yes, we are. Maybe not quite live. Are we live? Yes, I think we're live. Hi, everybody. It is Thursday afternoon. Thursday, I think it's the 3rd of June or something. Can you believe that we're in the first week of June already? And can you believe that here I am popping into your lives once again? As if you haven't had enough of me today. Um, but, we thought we'd just try this off the cuff stuff when we feel like it. And why not? Because we actually do feel like it right now. And we can't do it tomorrow because Chris isn't around tomorrow. And so, anyway, what are we going to talk about? Chris, do we have anybody there? Is there anybody there?
It always surprises me, Rosemary, but yes, we do.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, then. All right. I always think, sometimes when we do this, um, you know, have people had enough? Are they fed up? Shall we bother at all? Shall we do this anyway? So, I just think, if nobody else is there, you and I could have a chat anyway, couldn't we? We could just talk to each other. Right. So before we begin, then, I would like to say hello to Grey Eagle, who, of course, as always, as you all know, is standing to my right side. And yes, Chris. Hi, Chris. How are you this afternoon?
Hi, Rosemary. Hey, I'm almost done with the newsletter, so anybody who has subscribed should be expecting that this afternoon.
Oh, yes. Yes, 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 yes. And I think we were talking, was it this morning or was it yesterday? I'm completely lost. We're talking about the fact that I am a wordie, which I love. I love words. I love crosswords. I love anagrams. I just love words. I just, I like if I hear a word that I don't know the meaning of, or it just makes me curious. I like to know the derivation of it. So I'll go into that sort of thing. I can hear some of you saying, haven't you got anything better to do? And, well, I suppose sometimes I don't have anything better to do. Right. So, uh, I thought today that I'd talk about neighbours. And aren't neighbours funny people? You've either got great neighbours or not so great neighbours, or, maybe they don't talk to you, or maybe you never see them, or maybe they're at work all the time, or maybe you've got some brilliant neighbours who just are just those kind of people who help you, who are always there for you. And this morning, when we were doing our show, The Spirit World Sees All, at some point I saw my neighbour going across my lawn, and I'm thinking, what's he doing? This guy, where is he going? What's he doing? And then I saw him go across again, and then I saw him crossing back, and then he crossed again. And I realised after the show, when I went out to see what on earth was going on, I realised that today is bin day, everybody. Trash can day, as you would say in America, and bin day, as we say in England. Dustbin day, as we would say in England. And so the bins were out this morning, or the trash cans were out this morning for the guys to collect. And he had gone down there and picked up my bins and brought them up for me and put them where they should belong. That's a nice neighbour, right? The only problem with this neighbour is he and his wife, they are fabulous neighbours. They are the greatest neighbours. But there's a big problem with them, is that they're only here sometimes in the year. And I'm just waiting for that time, if ever, that they come and live here full time. Because if they come and live here full time, they're such good people, such nice people, such friendly people, and what we would call really good neighbours. Now, on the other hand, there are certain neighbours who maybe, I'm talking about my neighbours, there are certain neighbours who, well, maybe they just want to keep to themselves. Maybe they don't like to neighbour. I personally don't really like to neighbour, I have to say to you. But we did have something happen recently where there was a lovely lady who lived on the street, and unfortunately she lost her husband. And as all good neighbours try to do, I tried to help. I took food over, I helped her out from time to time, invited her over here for dinner a couple of times, and we went shopping a few times, and so on and so forth. Anyway, we were sort of as sort of neighbourly. Uh, and one day, my friend came over to visit. She said, "Oh, I see she's got a for sale sign in her garden." I said, "Oh, really?" I'd just come back from New York at the time. I said, "Really? I didn't know that. I didn't see it." The next day, um, there was a moving truck, and then when I looked again, she was gone. And it's a bit disappointing when your neighbours you think you have some sort of a relationship with, a friendly relationship with, and they disappear on you. They don't even say goodbye. And so I thought, I was thinking about this today. We have neighbours who are great. We have neighbours who perhaps are not so great. We have, and we live with these people, don't we? It's important that we have a reasonable relationship with them. And I know that there are many people out there who have neighbours who are really, really awful, and that must be a terrible thing to contend with. And that has actually never really happened to me. But I thought, well, I suppose I'm thinking to myself, talking to myself, going around the house talking to myself, and I'm thinking it's all about hope and expectation, isn't it? Is the difference between hoping that that people will behave in the way that you hope you behave towards others. If you expect behavior, certain type of behavior, whether it's from your family, your friends, or your neighbors, if you expect it, you are inevitably going to be very, very disappointed, as I was disappointed because this lovely lady left and didn't even wave goodbye. So one minute she was there, came home, and she was gone. Okay then. So sometimes if you expect, you can be very disappointed. In fact, if you're the kind of person who expects other people to treat you in a certain way, or you expect them to treat you with respect, or if you expect them to treat you as you might treat them, sooner or later you're going to be disappointed, because if you have high expectations of people, they're never going to meet them. And many people aren't obliged to meet them, are they? I like to remain, instead of expecting, I like to remain hopeful. Thinking about this, I would have rather being hopeful that this lady would have said at least goodbye and was nice to have you as a neighbour and see you, and just ditch me and not say a word. But I'm disappointed because I was expecting that. I suppose it would have been the right thing to do, but then it's only me who's saying it would be the right thing to do. Obviously, she didn't think it was the right thing to do, so there you have it. Maybe I disappointed her in some way. I don't know. Am I rambling here? I just was. Oh, can you believe that? Oh, sorry. I thought I'd switched it off. So I mean, it's. Am I expecting too much, Chris? Am I expecting instead of being hopeful? What do you think?
Well, I can tell you after we moved away from a 4-bedroom farmhouse into an apartment building, I was really dreading being next to so many people because I'd had all the space I ever needed. And I must tell you how pleasantly surprised I am. It's not that I know everyone in my apartment building, because I certainly don't. People like to stay to their own places. But there's a couple of people I just love. If we're passing each other in the hall or we're outside, we just start chatting and it's kind of nice. So,
Yes.
it's luck of the draw, I think.
Well, I get that. I suppose I did start talking about neighbours, but I wasn't thinking about that so much as the difference between expectation and hope. And I think that we so often we we have expectations of our loved ones, we have expectations of our siblings, we have expectations of our family, and we often, as I've just pointed out, we have expectations of our neighbours. I certainly didn't expect my neighbours to come and pick up my bins and bring them up the driveway for me. But I'm always hopeful that I have good neighbours. And you see, there we are. I was rewarded this morning with a good neighbour. I think I suppose I'm trying to sort out the difference between how can you not sometimes expect, and the fact that when we do expect, it inevitably brings us to being disappointed, because sooner or later, if we expect someone to behave in a certain way and they don't, because why should anybody meet our expectations anyway? But when we expect people to behave in a certain way, or when we expect things from people, we really set ourselves up, don't we, for disappointment. And I think, how can we stop setting ourselves up for disappointment? I think that's really what I'm trying to say.
Well, we have a few people on that are mostly saying hello. So Maria is on from Arizona. Our friend Kay is on from the UK. Josephine, a bottom bricker's on from New York.
Hi, Bottom
Ken
Bricker.
Ken is on. I'm not sure where from. Joe says, I've lived in my home for 50 years. All former neighbors have passed. I was the youngest in the neighborhood, but now I have reached the second oldest. Raising children here was the best.
Wow, I can't imagine what it must be like to live in a place for 50 years. I personally have been a traveler, and the idea of living, I think I think other than growing up, I think the longest time I've ever lived in one place was probably in Vermont when I was there for 15 years, and that seemed like an awfully long time, 50 years in the same place. But when new neighbors come in, this is what we want to know from you now. What are your new neighbors like? Do they respect the fact that you're the oldest? Do they know that you know their neighborhood? Do they value your wisdom and your knowledge of the neighborhood? Has the neighborhood changed? Is it better? Is it worse? What is it? Tell us more about that, Chris.
And Jillian says, wherever you go, there you are.
All right then. Do you, does she mean wherever she goes, there I am? What does she?
I think so.
Is that a good thing, Gillian? Is that really a good thing? Oh boy. So, um, so let's get back to the hope and expectations thing, because so often, and this shows when we're doing the bottom brick exercise, isn't it? We look to our parents, and we have expectations of them, even as we kid, even though we don't realize we have expectations of them. But as children, you would expect that if you're going to get love and nurturing and all those good things, it's going to come from your parents. And how many of us have been disappointed because we have had those expectations? But sort of having those expectations of our parents are one thing. We have expectations of our partners, and we have expectations of our children, and so often we set ourselves up for disappointment, because somebody said this morning that she had a boss who was a real bully. We have expectations of being treated with respect in the workplace, and when we expect, we do very often set ourselves up for being disappointed, don't we? If we are hopeful and it doesn't work out the way we want it to, at least it's, our hopes are dashed a little bit, but it's not quite as painful. But when we have expectations, the results, when we are disappointed, when we are let down, when those expectations aren't met, can be quite devastating, and it can be quite painful too.
Wendy says, my husband reads Marcus Aurelius, who teaches about expectation. He tells me not to expect anything from people. Then I'll never get disappointed, as I'm prone to that. We live in an RV, so our neighbors change, good and bad to that.
Well, yeah, I mean, Marcus Aurelius, yes, wow. Well, yes, I mean, does that mean that we should never expect anything? shouldn't we expect to be treated with respect when we go into a store? Shouldn't we expect to be treated with respect by our children? Of course, they disappoint us all the time, but should we expect it, or should we just simply learn to be hopeful? I know that if somebody treats me disrespectfully, uh, I'm going to stand up and say something. I'm not going to let it go. I'm not going to let it go by. That brings up another topic of, I talked to people a couple of days or so ago about long-term peace. People who keep the peace just for the sake of it. And then somebody does something or says something it's offensive, or it can be offensive just to you, or it can be offensive to the family, and you keep the peace, or you turn away and you pretend to ignore it, keeping the peace just for the sake of it. So it's sort of, short-term peace inevitably always brings long-term misery. As our caller this morning was saying, putting up with the boss, putting up with the boss, putting up with the boss, not saying anything, not saying anything. Short-term peace, keeping the peace, keeping the peace, always keeping the peace. But when you keep the peace just for the sake of keeping the peace, eventually you become really downtrodden. You become worn out. Or when you do finally say something, you don't say something in a good way. You say something in an aggressive way, which sort of can cause all sorts of arguments and problems. And I think that, if we can learn to sort of say something, but remember to say it in a way, if somebody is disrespectful to you, nip it in the bud straight away. Please don't speak to me like that, or please, I won't have you talk to me that way. And then if somebody says, well, what you can do about it, you say, well, here's what I'm going to do about it. You can talk to the wall and I'll go into another room, or I'll leave, or something, whatever it is. I'm not saying leave home or leave the house, but people can't be rude to you, or they can't be angry with you if you're actually not in the room. Sometimes we put ourselves in these positions because we think that we need to act a certain way. I don't know, expectations, hope. Am I trying to do too much today? Am I trying to sort of work out a problem that's an ongoing problem that will never be solved? I don't know. I just thought today, we expect so much. We expect so much from the government, people who don't go to work anymore. Some of them because they really, really can't get a job, and they've tried and tried and tried. But those people who expect handouts, and 80% of the time they get them. Should we expect? And if so, why should we? And I don't think it's, the right way to go personally. For me, I try not to expect too much, except that I do expect to be treated with respect. And if I'm not, then you'll hear about it. Chris?
So Jillian said, no, I mean, you bring your expectations with you. You can move, and unless you change your thought pattern, you tend to repeat situations in your life. I do love having you two around.
Oh, good. And I agree with what you just said. Yeah, we do bring our expectations with us, don't we? Unfortunately, a lot of people bring expectations into relationships, and perhaps bring far too high expectations into relationships, and inevitably then we're definitely going to be disappointed when that happens, aren't we? I think if we can learn to be hopeful more than expectant, I think that's probably one way to go. I just thought I'd throw it out there, and you could all, here you are, you're in my living room, come on. I mean, I'm giving you tea. Oh, well, maybe I'm not, but I'm giving you, what am I giving you? If you were really in my home, we'd be having a tea party. I'd have made scones, and I would have made shortbread, and we'd have all been sitting around chatting and having a party, wouldn't we? Let's pretend that you're in my home. There are no scones for you. There are no shortbread. I really should make some shortbread tomorrow. Chris is not around because she's going off on a holiday. So I think I might just go in the kitchen and make some shortbread and some hobnobs and some, I don't know, ginger fairlings or something. Yeah, that sounds. Maybe I'll have a cookie day tomorrow. Yeah, Chris.
Ken says, I wanted to thank you for your book that I read 23 years ago
Oh my gosh.
when my fiance had liver cancer.
All
It
right.
helped me let go and say goodbye, knowing that he would be fine on the other side.
Oh, Ken, that's lovely. Which book was it? Perhaps after 23 years, you might not even remember the name of it, but I'm so glad that you shared that with us. And yes, I mean, isn't it good that, when we learn about these things, whether somebody's talking about life after death, whether somebody's talking about, is it real? Is it true? Whatever it is we're talking about, or whatever it is we're reading, it can be so impactful. And I'm so glad that it was actually one of my books that really helped you to get through that awful, awful time that you had. Chris.
Kay says, I have
Yes.
no immediate neighbors apart from every Friday night and Saturday night where there's a lot of drinking and noise from the club next door to me. I
Uh-oh.
try not to expect good behavior, and I am rarely disappointed. Oh,
Oh, never mind. Never mind, Kay. I was actually talking to Kay today. Uh, she has a new grandson, Alexander. Oh gosh, he's gorgeous. He really is gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. So that I'm very jealous of you, Kay, because you've now got two grandsons. Uh, but having said that, I'm so thrilled with my own little boy. Uh, Chris, keep going.
Lee says, good evening, all. I have always kept the peace. I still do. Does my stomach turn? Yes, but
Oh,
rather than fight, I think it's okay.
well, we all have choices, and if you're happy just with keeping the peace, and if that stomach churning doesn't make you sick, if it doesn't make you ill, if you're fine with it, that's fine, and it's your choice. I'm not suggesting for 1 second that we should all sort of start rebelling. Wouldn't that be fun sometimes? But what I'm saying is that you know, short-term peace for the sake of it, just because it's easier or just because it's going to stop an argument, will inevitably lead to long-term problems, will lead to long-term misery of one sort or another. But here you are, maybe you're proving me wrong, and I don't mind if you prove me wrong. So Lee, I'm glad that you joined in here.
Carolyn says, I'm for being hopeful. If we try to protect ourselves from disappointment, are we building walls?
If Say that again. If we try to
Protect ourselves from disappointment, are we building walls?
I think that possibly, Carolyn, we're hiding behind the walls that have already been built. I'm not suggesting that we should hide. I think being hopeful is a good thing. Life is full of disappointments. We can't avoid them. But I think that sometimes we put our expectations onto other people, and our expectations are far too high. uh, they must get frustrated trying to meet our expectations, and we certainly going to be disappointed because those expectations are often not going to be met. But I think, hiding or trying to avoid disappointment is definitely hiding behind your walls. I think that's yes. I think that's so.
All right. Ken said the book was The Eagle and the Rose.
Oh right, okay,
And
yes.
and Abraham Hicks says the best thing we can do is to have the highest expectation of people to set the vibration.
Oh, golly, that's very interesting. I'm glad you told me that. In a way, I can see that he's right. I can see that we should. It's okay. It's sort of like when you have children, and I always did this with my daughter, and I do this also with my grandson. Even when my daughter was 2 and 3 years old, I always expected that she would understand me when I was talking to her. I never taught her as if she was a child. I always talked to her as if she understood what I was saying, and she always rose to those expectations. But okay, so yes, so in that way, I agree that we should always, sort of have high expectations, perhaps of ourselves and of others, as long as we understand that those expectations are often unrealistic, as long as we understand that those expectations are not going to be, if they're not met, are not going to devastate us or disappoint us. And I think there are far too many of us, and sometimes myself included, I've done this when we've had expectations of people when we've had no right to have those expectations. So rather than be hopeful as opposed to expect perhaps too much from people.
Josephine says, thank you for mentioning the need to ask people not to speak to us disrespectfully. I just clarified with my husband today not to speak forcefully to me after enduring it for years. Not sure how it'll turn out, as I mentioned it to his friend. Please send him healing.
Well, I think you've been very brave to tackle that, my darling. And I think if we say these things in a way which is kind and gentle, not accusatory, I think that we give people the benefit of the doubt, and we say, we understand. I understand that you perhaps have not even realised what you were doing, but you need to stop doing it because I don't like it, and I've not liked it ever. So, and I think that if we do that in a caring and a loving way, and if with your husband you show him the caring and the loving that I know you have for him, I think he'll be fine. He may have a little bit of sort of dented ego. He may have a little bit of, well, it's a bit nerve wracking, isn't it? Can you imagine that you've been doing the same thing over and over again, and nobody's told you to stop, and you think it's okay, and you don't even realize that therefore you're doing anything that's wrong or anything that's hurtful to anybody else, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, years go by, and then suddenly somebody says, I've never liked you doing that. It's kind of like a little bit like, okay, um, you give somebody pork chops for dinner, okay, and every week on a Thursday night you give them pork chops, and every week on a Thursday night you give them pork chops, and then every week and so on, and the months go by, and then the weeks go by, the years go by, and all of a sudden your spouse, whoever it is, says to you, I just have to tell you that you've been giving me pork chops now for 20 years and I hate them and I've always hated them. You would be so puzzled and confused. You would think to yourself, well, why didn't he say something sooner? Or why didn't she say something sooner? So I think that, sort of that example is maybe a little exaggerates the issue, but why don't we say something sooner rather than putting up with stuff we don't like or we don't want? And as long as we say, and if we say it sooner, also, we say it in a nicer way. So I'm very proud of you. Keep going, Chris.
808 Christina says, I think the only expectation we should have is for ourselves, the expectation of our worth and our love for ourselves, expectation of how we should be treated and treat others.
Yes, I think that's good. Don't you love this, Chris? We're having conversations here. People are responding, and I like it when people agree, and I like it when people disagree, and I like it when people put in another point of view or a different way of looking at things. I think all of these things are really, really good. So let's keep it going. This conversation that we're having, this off the cuff stuff that we're having.
So here's a puzzlement for you.
Uh-oh.
When I hear you say hope versus expectation, I think of, when I was younger, I would so anticipate going away on a vacation someplace, what you were going to do, the things that you were going to be exposed to, how was the weather going to be, the excitement of it all, right? Anticipation is very closely related to expectation, and you can be disappointed with both. Let's throw that one into the mix.
Yeah, I don't see why it's a puzzlement, because it sort of, they go hand in hand, don't they? The sort of the anticipation, oh, of yes, I can remember going on holiday uh, years and years ago. We went to Ireland, and I was 15 years old at the time, and golly, I was so excited. We're going to the south of Ireland, and the year before we'd been, and the people who owned the pub and the post office, which was all in the same building, funnily enough, you just went into the into this building. The pub was on the bar was on the right hand side, and the post office was on the left hand side. It was yeah. Anyway, it's Southern Ireland we were in. Anyway, they had a beautiful dog, and the year before, when we'd gone, I'd gone and take the dog for a walk every day, and I spent hours with the dog, and I loved the dog. So here we are, we're on the bus, we're arriving in this small town, and all I can do is just wait and wait and wait, because all I want to do is go to the dog, go get the dog again. So off I go to get the dog, and something horrible happened. The man who owned the pub, he said to me, "Oh, come into the back with me, and let me show you, where the puppy sleeps." And I was very naive at the time. I was 15 years old, but I was a skinny young little thing, very naive and so on. And anyway, so he said, here's his kennel. Do you want to go inside and see? And no, I'm fine. And the next thing, well, I'm sure you can imagine what happened. The next thing that happened, and he grabbed me, and I tried to push him away, and it was not, I managed to get away, let's put it that way, and never went back, but could never tell my parents anything about any of it, because why didn't I tell them? Because they wouldn't believe me, and I knew that they wouldn't believe me. But we were there for just over 2 weeks on this holiday, and I never went back for the dog. And all I got from my parents every day, several times a day: "Why don't you go and get the dog? What's going on with the dog?" Now, had I been a parent, I am a parent, and my daughter was really looking forward to doing something like that, and then for some reason, unaccountable reason, did not, my antenna would be up, and I would think, what's gone on? What is going on here? What's happening here? But my parents just thought that it was me, and so on and on and on it goes. And when we came back, home, my mother was really berating me, and I had then expected, if I told her then, that she would believe me. And actually, so I told her, and she told me that I needed to have my mouth washed out with soap and water. It was not a pretty thing going on here. But at Christmas time, someone else in this little village that we were in actually sent a newspaper to my parents, and it was everywhere. It was all over the place. The news, headmaster, because this guy was not only did he own and run the pub, and his wife ran the post office, but he was also headmaster of the main school. Headmaster is sent to prison because he'd been doing this sort of thing for years and years and years. You hope, you expect, in a way, that your parents are going to believe you. You hope they're going to believe you, and bingo, they don't. Now, what did my parents say when they saw all of that? You know that they turned around and apologized to me, right? Do you know that they're going to say, "Rosemary, we're really sorry. And are you one? What happened? And tell us what happened." But no, it was brushed under the carpet and never spoken of ever again. People don't behave as you would hope that they would, as you expect that they would. But I was on the bus, and I was anticipating. I was expecting it was going to be great, and I was anticipating, and I was excited, and I was also hopeful, and all that was dashed. So yes, disappointments and sort of anticipation, it all goes along. But what do we do about it when it happens to us? We hope we rise above it, don't we? Chris, did you like that story? Just
No,
forgotten all
I feel
about that.
depressed after that story.
Well,
But
sort of, as we're talking about things, this thing sometimes happens to us, doesn't it? It sort of, it sort of all came, the memories come back to you, and you remember this. That this is what happens when you're in my home. We're all sitting around the table. We're all having shortbread. I wish I had some now. I do have some hobnobs. I might go and get those in a minute. But we're all talking and chatting, and this is what happens. So anyone out there, any memories, any thoughts, anything at all that you want to talk about, here is your opportunity to share with us, because we are open and we are ready and we are raring to go.
So Josephine was responding to you from earlier saying, "Now you've got me laughing. Thanks. So true. I will be kind as you suggest. I'm laughing due to your pork chop story."
Oh, right. Well, it's the same thing, really, isn't it?
And then Ken says, "Boundaries and knowing our self-worth will keep others and ourselves in check."
Yes, I do agree with that. And I know that my lovely friend Kay is there listening to this. Years and years and years ago, I had a lovely friend in England, and she was my special friend, and she was brilliant, and I loved her to pieces, except that she would come into my home, and sometimes, she would not know that there were boundaries, and sometimes those boundaries, aren't they, Ken? Sometimes those boundaries are unspoken boundaries, right? Now, what I did was, I had this little thing. I typed it up and I put it on the inside of one of my food cupboards. And so, if I wanted someone to see it, or if I felt the need to remind somebody of certain things, boundaries, I would say to them, "Could you mind going to the food cupboard and just getting me out whatever was in there?" And they would open the doors, and taped on the inside of the door is this little saying, which I do feel is often, not always, but often necessary with our family, with our friends, with our neighbors. Okay, so here is the little saying. Are you ready for this?
We're ready.
It is the responsibility of the host to make her guests feel at home. It is the responsibility of the guests to remember that they are not at home. There, throwing that out at you.
Oh, that's a pretty good one.
Yeah. We're talking about boundaries, and sometimes people need to be reminded, you can't, hey, what you doing? You can't just go in my refrigerator and take out the stuff I'm saving for tomorrow. Certainly not. I've had it happen to me. I'm sure some of you have had it happen to you. Somebody you uninvited goes into your refrigerator and takes out those things you've been saving for yourself when everybody else is gone. Anyway, Chris.
Lee says, "Disappointment is real."
Yes, it is. Absolutely. And disappointments, though, I think, see, I do believe that pain is that unwanted gift, that gift that we hate, that gift that just keeps on giving sometimes, because pain can continue on and on sometimes, and disappointments and pains and hurts and heartaches. But I do believe that it is the gift that helps us to grow and to learn, because as Grey Eagle would put it, and I've heard him say this many, many times. So, are you ready for this, everybody? See, we come out with these wonderful things. And as Grey Eagle would say, he's laughing at me. As Grey Eagle would say, if I were to smooth your path and leave no wrinkles, where would your learning be? Where would your learning process be? If I were to smooth your path and leave no wrinkles, where would your learning process be? So those disappointments and the pain that we sometimes go through, and the lack of hope that we sometimes feel, and the bullies that are around us in our workplace, and all of that stuff that goes on, they are the wrinkles in our lives put there so we can climb over them. We can learn to climb. We can learn to build. We can learn to grow. And we can learn that even through disappointments, as hard and as harsh as those disappointments can be, we can still smile, right? Aren't you all smiling with me now? Chris?
Joe is talking about her neighborhood, and she said it's a very diverse community. There are some language barriers, but a nice smile and a wave is always good.
You're right. Oh, so true. Keep going, Chris.
Lee says you should do a YouTube show, cooking in the kitchen, called Food for Thought. Come cook with Rosemary Altea.
Yeah, that's good. Do you want me to cook in the kitchen, or shall we just talk in the kitchen? Food for thought. Yeah. Well, I have to think about that one. That's a very, very good title.
Ken
Yes.
says, so sorry your parents didn't listen to you. Sometimes we find out much later that our parents didn't have the emotional capacity to admit
Right.
wrongs and reflect on their
Yes.
parenting.
You know, when we talk about these things, I always point out, and when we do the bottom brick, when we do that bottom brick exercise, it's very important, I think, that we should stop pointing the finger. My mother had done this, or my father had done that. Because when we look, if we look at our parents not as our parents, but simply as, you know, human beings with their faults and failings and their own bottom brick, their own reasons for protecting themselves, their own inability perhaps to be able to deal with the things that are going on in their lives. When we look at our parents and we just see just human beings struggling as we all struggle, I think we can be much more able to understand, or at least accept, that they were who they were. They did the best that they could in the moments that they had. And this is never, when I tell you the story about that guy, very abusive. I was very fortunate because I was able to shove him, and we were in this small, tiny space in the sort of at the door of the kennels, in this dog kennels, and I was able to shove him, and he stumbled, and I was able to run away. Um, so I was fortunate. I was very fortunate that that I was able to escape that. But it's something that has obviously stuck with me because, gosh, I was 15 when it happened, and I'm 122 right now. So that's an awfully long time ago, isn't it? But I think it's not about pointing fingers. It's about my parents not only didn't want to understand, they didn't want to, because that would have affected their nice relationship within this small village community. It affected my dad. It was the only pub. It was the only pub in the village. My dad couldn't go there for a drink. He couldn't go anywhere for a drink. And so my mother. It was that social area. So let's not rock the boat, shall we? Because it's so much easier to not rock the boat, isn't it? So, let's not rock the boat. Let's not cause problems. And rather than do that, let's just, whatever she's saying, let's put it to one side. We're not going there. And that, people, our parents, they don't always react how we would wish them to react. We're back to hope and expectations again. But it's not about pointing the finger. And I'm so glad, Ken, that you said, they had their own issues. They had their own bottom brick. And who are we to judge that? Chris.
Well, Ken also said the wound is where the light comes in. Our
Oh,
greatest learning comes from pain. We ascend and elevate ourselves out of darkness.
and don't we hate that? We hate that gift, don't we? But you're so right. And I couldn't agree more. It's the gift that we really don't want. Some of you will have heard me say this before. We used to have, years ago in England, and Kay, she's not fallen asleep because it's very late in England now, but we used to have this lovely lady who came through when I was in this sort of mild trance state, and she would always come through, and she would describe herself as I'm the little old lady with no teeth, and she would always complain that I had far too many teeth for her liking. But anyway, I remember her once asking us all what we wanted for Christmas, and we all said good things. I want peace, I want harmony, I'd like peace in my family. Everyone who was in the room there said, all, this is what we'd like for Christmas. And I remember her saying, if I could give you a gift for Christmas, I'd give you the gift of tears. I would give you the gift of heartache, and I would give you the gift of pain, because it is only through these things that you will truly learn and grow. So true. Who wants that gift? Not one of us. But who needs that gift? Every one of us. Chris.
What do you think of the saying, friends welcome, relatives by appointment?
Oh, I hate that saying. And here's another saying I hate, because I actually don't agree with it. Uh, although I sort of know what the relative thing's about, but I don't, but look, my friend Kay, who, if you're awake and still listening,
She is.
her family and her children are, I mean, you couldn't wish for a more joyous lot of people. That doesn't mean they're perfect family by any means, but my goodness, they're fantastic. And so I don't, another saying that I don't like, I don't adhere to. I do understand why people do, what is it they say that after visitors are like fish, after 3 days they begin to smell, something like that. When I have people come to stay at my house, they stay for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 months sometimes. I don't mind. Um, they're always respectful. If they're not, I point out that they need to be. It's very rare that I have to point it out, but I don't hold with that idea of uh, sort of limiting it, as long as, and Ken mentioned again boundaries, as long as when you have people in your home, they remember there are boundaries. You know, you cannot sleep in my bed. No, actually, you cannot use my towels. But I'll find you some really nice towels, and I've got a really nice bed for you. But no, you're not going to be, jumping into my bed and making me sleep in your bed. No, 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 no. And no, you cannot just go and help yourself to everything in the refrigerator. You can ask me, and I'll probably say yes, help yourself. But you can't just do it yourself without asking me, because I'm an earth sign and I plan and I strategize. And if I'm opening the refrigerator door and I've planned to dice up some chicken for a chicken salad, and someone's gone in there and eaten it all without, that, what am I going to do? I'm lost. My plan is messed up. Anyway, Chris,
I
keep
was
going.
just going to say, please, nobody touch your chicken salad.
No, it's mine.
You worked
Oh,
so hard at that over this
I
weekend.
I don't mind sharing my chicken salad. I've got to make some more now. Anyway,
Uh,
go ahead.
Lee says all pain has a lesson attached. If we can bear it when it happens, we need to remember that. Not that it would make it go away, but maybe something good can come from it.
Yes, one of these days I'm going to talk to you all about the three chairs. For now, I'm just leaving you with that thought. But we don't have to like the pain. We don't have to accept it if we don't want to. We can complain about it for all of our lives. It's not going to make it go away, is it? It's not going to make it different. So, to my mind, to my way of thinking is, at some point you have to say, uh, what am I supposed to learn from this? Hey, somebody help me out here. What am I supposed to learn from this? And once you start asking that question, you find that the pain does ease a little. Yes.
I think a lot of it stems from how you were raised as a child. Even right now, the children of today are raised with technology, right? So
Yes.
if they were to speak in their phone and say SIRI, I'm not going to say the word because my phone will go off.
And mine too.
It's say that word and then basically give me X, Y, and Z. And so kids are starting to talk that way as opposed to please, may I, please, could I, or at the end of a sentence saying please. It depends on how you're trained
Well,
sometimes.
actually, not in my household, because even though my grandson loves to ask who you just said, what's the weather, or the other one is AL, EXA. What's the weather? What's the weather in Florida? What are we doing here and there? And of course, you don't say please tell me and thank you very much. You don't do that. But uh, we have magic words in my house. One of those magic words is please, and another of the magic words is thank you. Another phrase, may I, please, may I. I'm a stickler for having good manners, and it is a shame because I think so many people weren't brought up with that, so they don't give that to their children, and it is a shame when sometimes I'll be talking to kids who aren't my kids or grandkids. They may be friends of my daughters or friends of my grandson or something, and they say something or they ask for something, and I just look and raise an eyebrow because they've forgotten the magic word, and they look back at me and think, what's she looking at me for? Sometimes I have to say, there's a little magic word I think you're forgetting. That would be please. And usually they say, oh yes, please. They're fine about it. And if they're not, they don't get what they want, because I won't give it without a please or a thank you. It won't happen in my house. Yes. See how mean and tough I am?
Ken says, now that we are older and parents ourselves, we understand so much better and have compassion and understanding.
Oh, I can, I so agree, except that uh, I wish it were true all across the board, because I even today I see so many parents who are so busy on their phones, into their computers, talking with their friends. You know, I was talking to friends of mine the other day. You go to the beach and there are a crowd of people and they're having a great vacation. They're all sitting around in a circle and they're drinking, which is actually not allowed on Florida beaches, but people do. They bring, they hide it in their flats or whatever, and they're sort of just sitting around, they're drinking, they're having fun, they're enjoying themselves. And the children, the young children, the 3-year-olds, the 4-year-olds, even sometimes the 2-year-olds, on the edge of the water. And when I'm there, it's a nightmare because I'm watching their kids. It's like, oh, no, 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 no. And they're all sort of crowded and having a good time. And I get it, I understand it. And it's the sun shining and the beach is beautiful. And there are these kids who have moved further and further away. Have you not heard of people who sort of can snatch your kids from under your nose? Have you not heard of kids who can drown in 2 inches of water? I'm sort of, sometimes it's not a joy to me to sit on the beach because I just want to go over to the parents and say, you need to pay attention to these kids so I can just read my book and relax. But yes, well, we all have our little crosses to bear, don't we, Chris?
Let's see. Right now, I feel like it's the Ken and Lee show, so I've got a few comments from both. Ken says it's human nature to feel pain and avoid it, but there is no light without darkness.
Very true.
Lee
Where
says,
there
go
is
ahead.
light, there is dark. Very true.
Lee says, don't overdo your stay as a guest. Even fish stink after 3 days. That's the saying. And you can
Well,
always
I disagree, but keep going.
you can always say because it's your house and you said so as the reason. And technology is ruining many things. Number one is the family unit. How many of
Okay.
us have the conversation about the phone at the dinner table?
Now, here's me. I'm going to interrupt because, after all, I'm the host here. Do we have anybody else wanting to make a comment, or is everybody just listening in and enjoying this back and forth? Not that I'm not enjoying it, but I would like to hear some of the comments from other people, if there are any.
AM says, hi, Rosemary and Chris, always right on time, in the right moment, in the right subject. Grateful.
Oh, good. Do you have anything else to add to the conversation? We'd love that. Chris, keep going.
Kay says, Rosemary, we as kids were raised with very mixed boundaries, and there were such confusions. But it did help me with a sense of humor. So my wonderful girls have reminded me of humor, and some parents now are not present for the children. And yes, my girls are wary of taking me into public areas. LOL.
Never mind your kids wary of taking you to public areas. I'm wary of taking you to public areas. Just for everybody's information, Kay is my oldest and dearest friend, so we can insult each other as much as we like, and we're fine with that. Right.
Gail says, "Oh my goodness, I know what you mean. I think I have radar for children who stand up in the grocery store cart at the store. The parent is always looking in the opposite direction when I see the toddler leaning head first over the edge. And there I go, dashing and grabbing for the child. Most of the
I,
time, the parent looks at me as if I have offended them. Gee
I
whiz."
know. I know. I actually once saw a child fall out of a shopping cart. Um, and the person pushing the shopping cart didn't even notice. Even with the screams and the cries and all the hubbub of all the people around picking up the child and making sure the child was fine, the parent, we assume it was the parent, was sort of oblivious to what was going on. I know how hard it is to parent. I know that your mind isn't always on the job. I'm fully aware of all of that. No perfect is parent, but no parent is perfect. But you know, uh, be careful with our children. Be careful. Be careful. Careful with them. Something happened here, sort of fairly recently in Florida. There was a lady in a supermarket, and she had her 5-year-old sort of sort of at the front of the cart, and sort of standing on the bar at the bottom and holding onto the cart, and the mother was pushing it around, and it meant that the child was ahead of the mother and the cart was in the way, and the child was literally snatched by a guy in the grocery store, and the mother couldn't get around. There were too many people, too many shopping carts, so on and so forth, and she finally, and the kid is screaming, and the man's running off into the car park with this little girl, and the mother flies out of the door and does a dive bomb on top of the guy and literally sends him flying into the car park. Fortunately, the child was fine. A few grazes and bumps and bruises. You can never be too careful, and parenting, it is not an easy. It's not an easy job. Yes, Chris.
We do not have any more comments, Rosemary.
Well, that's it then. So I think then, Chris, I should let you go and have your weekend off. Now, you're not entirely having a weekend off, are you? Because we are back on Saturday morning for our story time. And I've got a great story for you this week. When I decide what it's going to be, they're all great stories, so I can say that quite easily. When I decide what it's going to be, then I'll let you know. Chris, I know that Chris is going to be with family, and you're sort of going to be really literally traveling for, I think, for the 3 days. I'm presuming you're taking a break on Saturday morning so we can do our show, and then off you go again. So I suppose after this gruesome May, it was such a great, wasn't it? It wasn't really gruesome at all. Tough work, hard work, but it was a great May. It was great celebration. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for our 25-year anniversary of the Eagle and the Rose. The first publication of the Eagle and the Rose, and thank you all for joining us for that. I'd like to mention that we do have our webinar on the 26th of June. If you need tickets, you need to get them, sort of be quick about it, because we're going to be seriously starting to advertise that in the next couple of weeks. Yes, we're going to be, what are we talking about in this webinar? I'm going to be giving messages from the spirit world. That's what I'm going to be doing, with Grey Eagle, of course. So if I don't see you before, we are not doing any off the cuff stuff tomorrow. You've all got a day off. See, I won't be around tomorrow at all. So suppose that means I've got a day off as well. So I shall hopefully see you all on Saturday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's Florida time, for those of you who are not quite sure what that means, with another great story. In the meantime, thank you everybody for joining us. It's been a lot of fun. Off the cuff stuff is always a lot of fun. Thank you, Chris, for being there, for being available. Have a great weekend off. Enjoy yourself. I'll see you Saturday morning briefly, and then off you go again. And I would like to say a special thanks to Greg, of course. Thank you all. Thank you for joining me. And okay, you can go to bed now and go to sleep now. It is, after all, I think it's 11 o'clock or even after 11 o'clock your time. So until I see you all again, please, all of you, have a very blessed rest of the day. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your questions. We do love you very much. Please, all of you, again, have a very blessed rest of the day, everybody. Bye-bye.